Well, as promised, here we are at the main point, I guess, or main area of interest. That is the main house. And off to our right we have a barn. Again, most of it constructed from the local tabby, and the wing to that barn, which is made out of brick. It certainly would have been true that, as far as architecture and building materials, that years later they would have a local brick mason or location where the foundry where brick could be made and transported locally, making it feasible, I guess. On the other hand, the brick structure could have been added as part of the reconstruction of the museum, which I think took place about 1968, or at least began in 1968. Again, how much of this you can see, but this is the inside of what I thought was the barn, but it's being used here. I'm sure it was a barn, but here it's set up as a meeting house. You can see the benches, nothing in the front except a barrel and a window, of course, and entrances on both ends. And then we have a couple of placards here and a large iron kettle. Big iron kettle. I wonder how much that weighs. I bet it weighs a lot. Imagine that being cast in the day. And this placard shows how sugar cane was grown, and then of course it was ground up, it was set to fire, and extracted from it was sugar. And this was one of the early cash crops of the West Indies, or what would be the new colonies, but places like some of your Caribbean islands were renowned for growing sugar cane. Of course, the life was extremely hard, and the amount, as I understand, the amount of sugar that could actually be extracted from the cane was, well, we'll just say the yield was not profound. But yet, again, because of slave labor and the want for and the desire of sugar back east, or excuse me, back in England and elsewhere, particularly where you had a lot of tea drinkers, they loved their sugar, and they would certainly buy it at a premium coming from the West Indies. This particular placard, I doubt again that you can read as I'm taking video, but I'll share with you a little information. It has to do with the creation of Florida as a territory in 1821, much of it occupied and controlled by the Spanish. They had been on the forefront of emancipating the slaves, or giving them some rights and freedom. And what brought this about exactly, I'm not sure. In other words, was it humanitarianism, or was it a combination of economics and humanitarianism, or were there other reasons? I don't know. But there's a pamphlet here which reads Treatise of the Patriarchal Cooperative System of Society as it exists in some governments, and it has to do with the rights of blacks, free and enslaved. This photograph shows the some of the properties and the interest of Zephany Kingsley. He evidently was diversified. It reads, he ran shipping and mercantile businesses. Each of his plantations had a different cash crop, from Sea Island cotton to rice to citrus. He rotated his human property between plantations to make the best use of slave labor. And of course his properties, at least based on this placard, existed exclusively in this area, from just north of St. Augustine in St. Johns County, in what was called 12 Mile Swamp, to here in, actually north of here, to St. Mary's, just above Fernandina, across the Cumberland Sound. So, a little bit of history. I hope you like this, and I certainly am more than happy to share it with you. Again, it's a remembrance of my life with my children. The logistics necessary for this to work would have required access to the water, and here we are at the very water's edge of Kingsley Plantation. This waterway taking you out to the ocean for the vast interest that the Kingsley family evidently had there in the 1800s. They certainly again would have required port facilities from which to receive items which they could not obtain locally, and as well to ship those items either north and or perhaps, I'm guessing that they went north, but I was thinking possibly transatlantic, but I somehow doubt that. Somehow I think that the items would have been shipped to a centralized location, say for example, well, locally it may have been Jacksonville, what was Calford then, or some sort of collection point, and there they would have been consolidated for a transatlantic shipment if they were bound ultimately for Europe. Anyway, here we are at the beautiful water's front. It is so pleasant now. What it must have been like back then, no doubt for the slaves, was a completely different experience. They may have found their peace in moments, and when they could relax, when they could enjoy being with their family. But then, of course, life was extremely hard, perhaps for most people, but certainly for them.